Right, as is the wont of these things, this week's mailbag brought to you with a cup of coffee and your questions and your comments that you put on my channel that I try to answer. So we're going to start this week with a question from Unconventional Reality. Really cool name, actually. This thing is so cool looking. I picked it up on eBay and can't wait to use it. Now, this was responsible in response to the mailbag I did on the MX-1, the MX-1, the MX-1, and the MX-1. Excuse me. And I have to be honest and say the MX-1 is a quirky unit, and I think it brings mixed emotions. If you look at the MX-1, it is a fantastic idea. I think it's half-baked from Roland, although I think it's very, very usable if you know what you're doing with it. I think Roland really need to sort of get a kick up the arse. And I think Roland, I'm being really sort of quite specific about Roland, need to think about how they're going to support all this stuff going forward, because what they've done is they've started with a really good base unit when Aria came out, and Aria was sort of kind of 4 or 5 units at the time, so 4 USB sockets kind of worked okay. But now you've introduced all this boutique stuff and all the new stuff you've got coming through as USB outputs on it. The MX-1 makes a fantastic, or an MX unit makes a fantastic sort of keyboard controller setup within an artist's rig. And I don't think Roland are really capitalising on that sort of area. So I hope you enjoy the MX-1. I thoroughly enjoy the MX-1, using the MX-1. It does exactly what I needed to do at the moment, but I so wish the MX-2 would arrive. So, the next one for this week. Adrian Stewart writes, would I be right in saying that if you connect a Roland DJ controller like the DJ202, you'll be able to connect to one of the USB inputs? I've not been able to find a definite answer on this, thanks. And this was in response to a video I did on using the Aria via USB to the MX-1. Now, I honestly don't know the answer to this question, so cards on table. And maybe somebody else on the channel has actually done that setup and can sort of give us some sort of response to it. Now, this is kind of my take on it. Okay, the MX-1 came out before the DJ controllers came out. Okay, they've come out since. The Roland have put several software updates onto the MX-1 since the MX-1 was launched. However, they don't specifically state support for any of the DJ equipment. But neither do they state support for the boutique equipment, yet the boutique equipment is supported in terms of it does allow USB audio, etc., to pass through from the unit. So I kind of think it won't work, and the reason I kind of think it won't work is because I don't think specific stuff was put into the MX-1 codebase to allow it to work. But there is a part of me that says it possibly will. And the only thing I can really suggest here is try and find somebody who's got an MX-1 and potentially somebody who's got a DJ202, or if you've got a DJ, whatever it happens to be, and sort of try and do a buddy up session and just see if you can get the audio to run through from the 202 through the MX-1 mixer. It kind of is what the MX-1 was designed to do. However, again, I think sort of the support from Roland on this whole area needs kick up the bum, if I'm honest. But hopefully that's not really answered your question, but it has put it out there for somebody else to try and answer your question. Okay. Next one comes from my friend Bruce, another stalwart commenter on the channel. He writes, excellent info. The archive effort is now understood. I may bring Cork into the request for help. Now, this was in respect to the fact that I put the archive in place, or started putting the archive in place, and then found out that I managed to completely mess up all the ISOs that I created for one reason or another. And I have done a video fairly recently, say fairly recently, but within the last few months, where I actually sort of talked about all the issues I was having with setting up the archive library. So I'm not going to dwell on that bit. What I am going to sort of just cover off is the Alexander cookbooks. So the Alexander books are in depth, and T-Series cookbook seems to be about using a T-board, as they call it, for arranging music in an era between 1989 and 1982 before DAWs became prevalent. And it's very true, and I wish I had with me an example of an Alexander cookbook. Alexander Publishing did a range of books, and I'm not really seeing for other keyboards, but they did a range of books really for the M1 and the T1, all about getting the best out of the instrument. And these books were written in fairly plain English and were really, really quite good. And if I can find an example, I may sort of stick it up there. Sorry, it's all reversed on the screen. That's the reason why my hands are going the other way around, and I'm not really awake, hence the reason why I'm drinking coffee. But they were really, really good. They were written in plain English, and they allowed you to get under the hood of the workstation very quickly. One of the things that you find about workstations is that manufacturers are cramming so much functionality into a workstation that navigating your way around the workstation, trying to get sort of the best out of the investment, is actually a sort of a fairly fundamental task when you start getting to grips with it. Now, I'm quite lucky that I've sort of kind of bought into the Korg way of thinking. I don't have Roland workstations. I have Roland synthesizers, I do not have Roland workstations. My workstations are in essence are Korg. So I've got an M1, I've got a T1, I've got an Oasis, and I've got a Kronos. And if you sort of kind of learn the psyche of the M1, you get the T1, and then you understand the bits that the T1 has on top of it. And if you kind of get the psyche of the T1, I'm sure that carried on into the Trinity and the Triton. But it sort of is sort of there's an underpinning logic, if you like, between the T1 and the Oasis, which is why I sort of kind of got the Oasis. But I had the Kronos first, so I understood how the Kronos worked, and then the Oasis was fairly easy. But it's getting under the psyche of how these workstations work and all the features and functions that the manufacturers are effectively pushing into the workstations. You really do need, when you buy one of these things, to probably shut yourself. And I sort of kind of know this from experience when I bought the Kronos, because I bought the Kronos and I set the Kronos up, and I sat there and went, did, right, and you get the drift. And I thought, oh, great sounds, right, now what do I do with it? And it all sort of took months, I will say months, because obviously I'm working, I don't do this full time, but it took months to get under the bonnet of the Kronos to actually understand how things on the Kronos actually worked. So, but it's one of these things, and this Alexander cookbook, I have to be honest, so the Alexander cookbook was great when I bought my T1, and Bruce sent me across a lot of material from Alexander. When I first got my T-Series board, and we made contact, because Bruce is a big T-Series user. And you sort of get under the bonnet of this thing and you realise just how powerful the M and the T really were, and how they really did change the game for the people who took the time to actually understand what these workstations were all about, rather than just sort of loading in stock sounds and playing them. Okay? But yeah, I agree. Alexander, if you've got a T or an M, do look out for the Alexander cookbooks, because they are fantastic pieces of source material. And this one is the last of this mailbag for this particular session. And this is another great name, Gregory Borosa. Fantastic. It's probably your real name, but still a fantastic name. And this one was in response to the A-80, the D5 and Don Rira, done about 2 and a bit years ago. I like the discussion of yours. I perform an A-80 all the time these days. A wonderful enhancement which really increases the enjoyment is a modern LCD screen. I upgraded 3 A-80s with them. They are a little pricey, but so much easier and nicer than the original screens. Go to reverb.com and search for A-80 graphic. Now, I've got to be honest and say, I have the A-80 set up. And it is a fantastic machine. I mean, the great thing about the A-80 is that it has 4 independent MIDI controllers, or 4 independent MIDI connectors on the back of it, which means that you can effectively run 64 channels of MIDI off the A80 independently controlled, which is what makes the A80 such an utter beast as a master controller. Now, and the other thing about the A80 is the keyboard action on the A80 is quite good. You know, for a weighted keyboard, it has a really nice hammerish action on it. So I can understand why A80s, you know, I see a few come up on eBay. There's one guy who keeps trying to sell an A80, but he puts the same photograph up and you can't see any pictures of the actual unit itself. It's just like of the end plate, which is probably the reason why he's not selling it. Plus the fact it's a little bit pricey, but that's a different kettle of fish. But the A80 itself, as a keyboard or as a master controller, I can really understand why a lot of artists went for the A80, and I can also understand why they don't come up very often, because people don't release them. In fact, the A80 and the Yamaha KW something like that, I can't think of what it is off the top of my head. Both of those, very, very rarely I see any of those come up on eBay, because they are so sought after. So, one of the jobs that I've had for a long, long time is to actually replace the screen on the A80. It's something I intended to do straight off bat. I didn't, and I do intend to do it. I am going to do a video series when I do it, so you guys can see what you have to do a A80 screen upgrade, because it's probably going to involve stripping most of the keyboard down, I suspect. And one of the other reasons why I haven't done that is because that thing is so damn heavy. It's about 35 kilos, nearly 40 kilos, between 35 and 40 kilos I think it is in terms of weight, which in itself, if you just had a bag with 35 kilos, would be heavy to lift. But if you imagine this thing is nearly 6 foot long and about, you know, I don't know, half a metre, 40 centimetres wide, you know, it's a lot of keyboard to manhandle by yourself. I mean, I know I do lift it on my own. But it's one of those things where you sort of have to kind of clear the area and make sure you've got lots of space and you're not going to trip over something, because it is a fairly big thing to manhandle. So it's probably going to have to wait until things happen in the new year and I get some more time to myself, because that is a project that I do intend to do. In fact, I've actually got the A80 screens, or the A80 screen. I've had it for about a year now. I just haven't got around to putting it in. It's like many. I've got so many jobs I want to do, like refitting the tack switches on the S50 and refitting the tack switches on a U20 I bought. You know, I just haven't got around to sort of performing and doing those things, because it's just a time thing. It takes time. It's probably a good day's worth of effort to strip the unit down, to get to the thing, to do the thing. And you've also got to have somebody with you who can do the videoing as you're doing it, because obviously I don't really want to do videoing. I've done it before. You have to set it up, but it's easy if you have somebody with you who can video over your shoulder. So yes, I think the A80 is an absolute solid machine. And if you are running legacy MIDI like I do, then really I have to be honest and say you need something like an A80 or the Yamaha equivalent, or a really, really good MIDI master keyboard from one of the stocks, or M Audio, or one of the other major players in that sort of MIDI master keyboard brand area. Don't try and do MIDI, or don't try and run legacy MIDI from standard keyboards or standard synthesizers, because you just don't have the depth and breadth of functionality on those keyboards that a true master controller will give you. And that, so the mayor is that. Till next week. Bye-bye.
Remember, hit that like button if you like what you saw. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified about more rants, more mailbag, more questions and answers, and more videos about this sort of stuff when it's loaded to the channel. Until next time, bye-bye.